gals, and welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, hi, my name is Hillary, and if you are a returning subscriber, then you must be a crazy Hilly, and welcome back. If you guys like the content that you're about to watch, feel free to give a like or subscribe or leave a comment down below. It actually helps the channel out so much. And if you want any type of merch or anything, there is also a link down there too, if you want anything that has to do with Hillary. Now, while I was on my very long break, I did some research on certain things that I wanted to cover. And I came across this one specific story, and it is an unsolved murder, so that's what tonight's going to be. It's an unsolved murder case, but this one stuck with me, and I think, honestly, it might be the worst one yet. It's pretty bad. So before we get started, I just wanted to, give you guys a heads up. This one, it's not good. It's really bad. It's, for me, out of all of the things that I've covered, I still feel like this one may be the worst one yet. So, yeah, I don't know how. I'm just giving you guys a warning. It gets messy. So tonight we're going to be covering the unsolved Girl Scout murders, or murders at Camp Scott. So already this case involves children, which is why I wanted to give this disclaimer, because the kids that were murdered in this were the ages from 8 to about 10 years old. So it's disgusting. Anything that messes with kids, I don't like it, but what we do on this channel is usually ghosts and unsolved stuff, so it is an interesting case, even though it is horrendous. In the summer of 1977, 3 young Girl Scouts, Lori Farmer, Michelle Gousset, and Doris Milner, were brutally murdered and assaulted. And when I say assaulted, it was bad. It was SA assaulted. And all this took place on their very first day at camp. So, not that this is a good, but of course it had to be on their first day of camp, their first day away from home. They just get to go to their first Girl Scout camp thing going on, and they end up being murdered that day. Now, before all these girls went to camp, there was actually a training session that took place, and this is what makes me so mad about this case, because there was some stuff going on previous to the girls coming that I really think the parents should have been notified, because there was a training session that was going on earlier before the girls showed up, and things were going missing throughout the camp. So all of the camp counselors are there training, and some things are getting stolen from certain areas. And basically what happened was there was a case of donuts that one of the counselors had left in their cabin. They came back and all the donuts were gone. There was actually a note inside that was written, and it was saying that 3 girls were going to be murdered in cabin 1. But this note also mentioned aliens and some other stuff, so they wrote it off as, oh, this must be a prank. But for me, how is this a prank? If there was a note that was written, that, and even if it was a joke, even if whatever, there's a saying that it was going to harm children, my first thing would be call the cops, let the parents know, because if any of these things were done, maybe the situation would be different. Maybe something would have changed. You know what I mean? It's just not right that this was just written off as, oh, that's a joke, when there was a note written saying, hey, 3 girls are going to be murdered. At least call the cops. At least mention it to the parents. But that wasn't done, and then the girls arrived to camp a few months later. On June 13th, 1997, Lori Farmer, age 8, Michelle Gousset, age 9, and Doris Milner, age 10, were off to Girl Scout camp. And they got there around 6 p.m. They had met earlier in the day, and it was actually a terrible thunderstorm was going on that night, so they took shelter in cabin 8. Now, the way that these cabins were set up, there was the counselor's cabin, and then they were all kind of spread out pretty far. Cabin 8 was actually the farthest cabin away from the counselor's cabin, and it was partially obscured by, I believe it was the bathroom hut or whatever they're called, an outhouse. But you couldn't really see it. And this cabin, cabin 8, which was housing an 8-year-old to a 9-year-old and a 10-year-old that was partially obscured, was about 300 feet away from the counselor's cabin. And 300 feet is pretty far. I mean, my front lawn is about 30 feet. So if you count, that's pretty far away. I don't know already, like, if you can't tell that I'm already really ticked off about this case, why you are putting 8-year-olds in a tent that far away from an adult, because you can't hear if something's going wrong. You know, it's really sketchy out. Anything could happen, and anything did happen. And to me already, girls that young should not be that far away from the counselors. There was also people that I had kind of seen that were saying, oh, it was a little bit of a, wasn't as dangerous of a time back then. And I'm like, no, time is still dangerous. Time is still dangerous. So why y'all putting 8-year-olds that far away from all the counselors? Don't make sense. Now, I want to go through some of the sketchy things that happened through the night, but at first, I believe it was around 7 o'clock, the girls were writing their notes home because it's their first day of camp. You know, it was kind of raining, so they all hunkered down in their tent and they were writing their notes home at around 7 o'clock. So if I can find the notes, I'll put it here for you guys to read, and you guys can just pause and reading it. I believe one girl wasn't too happy that she was there, and it's actually kind of haunting knowing what was to happen if you go back and you read that note. So if I find it, I'll insert it here. So there was a few sketchy things that happened throughout this night that I really wanted to like penalize these counselors for, because for me, I grew up working in childcare. Okay. So that's what I did from the age of like, I was probably like 15. Like I was just turning 16, which was like the legal age. So I worked there for well over 6 years. You know, I was always with children. So I kind of am upset. I'm very upset when I go through this case and I see all the things that weren't done that should have been done. Regardless of these counselors being like 19 at the time, for me, that's still not that big of an excuse because, again, you know, this is your job. You need to be taking care of these kids. But regardless, one of the counselors had said that they had seen lights, basically like a flashlight, going through the woods at night. So they're looking out and they saw this flashlight. And I do believe at one point, one of the counselors decided to check, but I don't know how thoroughly they did check, because for me, a check is going into each of the tents, opening the tent, checking to see if all the girls are in and going to each one. And you should be doing that periodically throughout the night. Pretty often, especially if there's someone over 300 feet away from you. 8-year-olds. I digress. Then again, throughout the night, another counselor stated that they heard these weird guttural sounds. And it was enough that they did get up and they kind of looked outside and they mentioned that the sounds were coming from cabin 8, like around that area. They heard these weird noises and it was coming from that direction. But I don't believe that they went out to check when they heard these sounds. And as far as we believe right now, this will come into play later, those guttural sounds might have been coming from the person that actually murdered these Girl Scouts, which for me, even if it wasn't whatever it was, if it's scary enough that you heard it, and you mentioned it to your other counselors, go check, okay? Because this girl went out, heard it. I think she went to talk to the other counselors, but I don't think that they went out at this particular time when they heard these noises. You need to go check, my guy. Like, you need to go and check. What if it's a bear? What if it's a tiger? What if it's, I don't know what's in those woods, but you need to go out there and you need to go check what those sounds is. Also, from what I'm aware, there was also screaming in the middle of the night. Someone was screaming for their mother, which again, when we hear what happened, is very haunting. But that was kind of written off as, oh, it's the first day of camp. A lot of people cry out in the middle of the night because they miss their moms, they miss their dads. You know, it's not a unnatural thing for that to happen. Again, go check on the kids, my guy. Go check. So the following morning at around 6 a.m., one of the camp counselors was going, I guess, to the shower house. She was going to go take a shower early in the morning before all the girls woke up, so she had time to go do that. And as she was walking down the trail, she sees 3 sleeping bags. And at first, her first thought is, oh, you know, those are 3 sleeping bags. I guess someone must have left them on the bus, and the bus driver came back and dropped these sleeping bags off so that whoever sleeping bags are, we can give it to them. So she went to go check, and unfortunately, inside the sleeping bags were the 3 girls. The 3 deceased Girl Scouts had been attacked, strangled, assaulted, beaten terribly, and other things that I'm getting goosebumps. I don't even want to talk about it, that had been done to them. And then they were jammed into their sleeping bags and left on the side of the trail. So obviously this, God, sorry, like this is just, it really upsets me, man. Obviously this camp counselor was horrified by what she saw. So they ended up calling the head counselor, I believe her husband, and the nurse. I don't know why the husband was there. Why are you at Girl Scouts? But he went out there and checked the sleeping bags, and there were in fact bodies in them. They had the nurse come out, and the nurse checked them. So already, y'all compromised this crime scene. Like, this is the 70s. I guess maybe they don't know much about crime scenes, but already, you know, you're going through the crime scene and you are compromising it heavily. So after that happened, obviously they called the police, and there was a big investigation that was held. All the girls were kept in their, like, all the girls were kept on property while their parents kind of were called. Everyone knew that there was something going on there, but no parent was allowed to pick up any of their children because obviously 3 kids had passed away. What I'm really upset with is, as far as I'm aware, the head counselor, I think, called a lawyer before calling the parents of the children. And when they did call the parents of the children, I am pretty, like, don't quote me on this, maybe we should double check it, but I am pretty positive that they did not specify exactly what happened. It wasn't like they said, hey, like, your daughters were murdered. It was kind of more like there's been an accident that they said went on, which for me, y'all need to be clear. You need to start off with, hey, we got murder letters, 1. And if something like this happens, the parents deserve to know. Like, you haven't told them what happened to their kid. They had to find out some sketch-about, roundabout way, and it wasn't directly from the head counselor. So shame on y'all. Also, apologies, I think I've been saying y'all a lot, but there's a lot of adrenaline running through this right now. Like, I am amped up, guys. So this is where it all gets sketchy, because there actually is one main suspect, like the one guy that is basically suspected, who I do think had something to do with it if he did it all himself. There was a lot of stuff going on at the time, and the man that was suspected of doing it was actually a First Nation, and at this time there was a lot of conflict. So it was a lot like the OJ trial, you know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of people that were saying he was innocent, and there was a lot of people saying, you're guilty. So the man that they suspected of doing this crime, who I'm pretty sure did it, I already want to say this out there, like, I already think it was this guy, but whatever. His name was Gene Leroy Hart, and he was actually an escaped convict at this point, and he was supposed to be in jail because he had assaulted, and when I say assaulted, again, SA, like, he assaulted 2 pregnant women at a casino, lured them out, did what he did to them, and he was making guttural noises while he did it. So that was another thing that I thought was odd, because one of the counselors had said, I heard these guttural noises, like it sounded, he was making those kind of noises. He was supposed to be in prison, but he had escaped, and he was on the run, and he was actually in the area at the time of these murders, not to mention that he grew up in that kind of vicinity, so he knew the area well. There was actually bloody footprints that were found inside the girls' cabin. There was DNA found on the girls themselves and the whole area, and I also believe a hair. But at the time, the DNA was not as good as it is now, obviously. So when they first tested it, it did not rule Gene Leroy out. It actually said that, like, I think it was a partial match, something to that degree. But again, the DNA wasn't good. They actually had to retest it in 2008, all this DNA, but the DNA was too badly degraded to get a proper sample. So as far as we know, the DNA testing did not rule him out. Could have been him, could have been one of his relatives. It just wasn't a close enough, like they just didn't have the technology to be like, haha, that's you, my guy. So after all this happened, they did a big search and they actually ended up finding a cave that they believe that Jean Leroy lived in. There was a bunch of stuff in there, and it ended up that there were some photographs in there that he had taken in prison. So that's why mainly they were like, it's him. But at the time, I have to put this in because it's kind of a big detail. They wanted it to be him so bad. There are some theories saying that the police may have planted these photographs in this cave to match Jean Leroy to the crime. I personally don't think that's true, but others might, so let's just put it in there because put it in there. And I also want to mention that if he was living in this cave, after the girls had all been cleared out of this Girl Scout camp, they had put a full-time security team on the premises of this Girl Scout area just in case, to protect the scene of the crime, to do all these things. And somebody had come back and was messing with the people there. Like they were taking certain trails, and I believe they actually took one of the victim's shoes that had been missing at the time the victims were found, and it was put into one of the security headquarters, like one of the rooms, and these security people were trying to catch this person. They were trying to set up tripwires to figure out which trails this person was taking, but they did not catch them. But it already sketches me so much that this person returned and put back like a vital, like, you know, a shoe of one of the girls and put it, like, that you came back, they came back after, and he was in the vicinity if it was him, and if the cops didn't frame him. We'll see. But regardless of that, they did end up catching Jean, and they tried him, but he was not found guilty for that. He did end up going back to prison, and it was for his previous crime of assaulting the 2 pregnant women, and he ended up going back to jail, and he actually did die in jail. But this was the whole reason that I was also so peed off at the jury that was on this case, because basically the reason that they did not try him, there was a couple things that were a little bit of like a discrepancy, and it was his shoes did not match the size of the footprint that they found inside the girl's cabin, and there was a couple other things. I think because the DNA wasn't a full match, it was also a kind of a shadow of doubt, so they let him go. But for me, there was a ton of evidence that, you know, proved that, like, apart from the pictures and the fact that the DNA was a partial match, the guttural sound, like, there was a bunch of things that pointed to him. But when I went back and I watched some of these videos of the jury, and I recall one lady saying, we're not saying it wasn't him. We're just saying we don't think he could have done this alone. And then I was like, how is that an excuse to not prosecute someone? You're not saying it's not him. You know what I mean? Like, get him and then get the other people. So that was one thing that threw me off, the fact that his shoe print was not the same size. But to me, that doesn't mean that he couldn't have done it by himself. I honestly think there was probably some people helping him, because when they found this man, he was actually being hidden by the community. People were hiding him in their houses because they were like, oh, no, like, you're one of us. He was actually related to the majority of people in that town. So, like, people were hiding him. You're telling me that he couldn't go out there with a friend and assault 3 girls? I see a lot of people that are like, I don't understand how one man could have held down 3 girls. I think that one man could hold down 3 girls, but I also do think that he may have had some help. I'm just kind of thinking, you know, if a man came into the tent at night and threatened to hurt one of your roommates, you might just listen to exactly what he says, especially if you are of the young age of like 8, 9, and 10. You are young. You usually listen to adults. You know, it's not a far cry to say that he did it on his own. I don't think he did. I think he had help though. Also, quick tidbit of information. We know it's a man because another Girl Scout actually saw this person. And I can't recall what the timeline was between seeing it, but one of the girls was awake in her tent, not cabin 8, a different tent, and a man opened the tent, shone a flashlight inside, and was looking at these girls. And one of the girls was awake and saw this. She pretended to be asleep, but he then closed and walked away. I don't think she got a good enough look at his face to see who it was, but knew that it was a man standing there by the shape and all this other stuff. So that is also kind of an important tidbit that I had forgot to mention that I think is important. But regardless, he actually went back to jail for the assault of the 2 pregnant women and ended up dying in jail not there that long after. So he was never convicted for the crimes of these girls, and it still remains unsolved to this day. I think by now the DNA is way too far disintegrated, and even the area, like the whole Girl Scout area, like you can't do anything with it now. It's all completely torn down. There's like no cabins left. They were all kind of palleted cabins. Like there's nothing left to prove, and I don't think it ever will be solved, even though I think we know who did it. I think it was him. I'm just gonna full out say it. I think it was this guy. It's just we don't have the evidence to say it was this guy. This is the problem with crimes in 1977. Like back then there just was not the technology that they have today. So basically you're looking at like a bloody footprint and you're like, might be a guy's, maybe. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna end that there. If you guys want to do more research on this case, feel free to do so, but don't fall down that rabbit hole that I found out because I was watching interviews, I was watching a bunch of stuff, and it really got my blood boiling. I've been thinking about this probably for the entire amount of time I've been off YouTube. So that's a while. But anyway, if you guys like this video, feel free to give a like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and I will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for watching. If you want any merch, that's down below. And did I say I'll see you guys next week? Yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.